they said to you, hey, I don't have a place to live and I'd like to have sex with you. Can I move in with you? You'd say, hell no. There's the door. What are you guys struggling with? I've been having... Have any of you had repression after abuse? Now, what do I mean by repression? What is repression? So I'm going to describe it as a psychologist, what repression is, and then let's talk about if you've had repression, and then how has it been going to reclaim the memories, or are you reclaiming the memories? Do you want to reclaim the memories? So repression is one of the defense mechanisms that were identified by Anna and Sigmund Freud. So Sigmund came up with the idea of defense mechanisms, and then Anna came on, his daughter, and jumped in, and she identified a whole bunch more. Defense mechanisms. The first earliest defense mechanism any of us have are denial, compartmentalization, splitting. Splitting is a big one. Splitting happens right away, right in infancy. So denial and splitting are probably the first two earliest ones. And then you add projection, compartmentalization. And then some of the other ones start to come on, and those like intellectualization. There's also repression, reaction formation. There's a whole bunch. I think there's like 30 of them have been identified. But repression's kind of like not early, but it's earlier. And what it is that it's different than denial. Denial, a great way of thinking of denial is it's like watching a horror movie and putting your hands over it and say, I don't see it, I'm not watching it, and then peeking. That's denial. You consciously know what's happening, but you keep trying to filter it out or pretend that it's not there. Repression's different. Repression is the mind. It's an unconscious process. It's where the mind says to itself, hey, this is too much for this person to experience. So we're just going to block it out altogether. We're going to pretend this never happened. And it literally takes that segment of the memories and just moves it elsewhere so that the conscious mind doesn't have access to it. And you don't even know that it's happening. So, for example, when I hear people say, well, I don't remember a lot of my childhood, my first thought as a clinician is, okay, is it because their childhood was that nondescript? Could it have been that boring and flat? Maybe it was so ordinary. Or is this somebody who's actually repressed memories and they just don't remember the events? I know, for example, I was severely abused, and there are pieces of it that are missing. I just don't know. I don't know, for example, big pieces, like things that you should remember. Who would not remember the first time you were assaulted, right? That's kind of noteworthy. I'm sure most of us don't forget. If you had a car accident or you were in an airplane crash, you don't forget those. You would remember those for the most part, but I don't remember it at all, and I know it's because it's been repressed. I've had repressed memories come back, and that's really wild. When it starts to happen, you start to feel like you're really, really scared to remember the thought, to remember the memory, and then all of a sudden you remember it, and when you remember it, you always knew it. It's like, well, I knew that. What, really? How did I not know that? I've always known that. So it's this strange feeling of knowing, but realizing that you didn't know, but now you know. I actually had one come back. I was sitting with a client in a hospital taking this history, and she was describing this event in her life, and suddenly, boom, the memory came back. I had this big flashback, and I remember thinking, I knew that. How did I not know that? But I had not remembered until the flashback came back. So, have you had repression in your life? Has any of you experienced that? And have you had an experience where it came back? And what was that like for you? So here's the other problem. When you have experienced narcissistic abuse, anybody who's listened to my platform knows that there's cognitive dissonance, where this person you met has created a false persona. So they're both good and they're bad at the same time. They're literally like living with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or Ms. Hyde in some of our cases. And we think we met the Dr. Jekyll personality and that they're really the person that we hoped that they were. And then when we get to know them, we start to see something else. We see hints of some other personality that's very foreign. That's the Mr. or Ms. Hyde personality. But interestingly enough, when the whole relationship is over, then you can have both experiences, both memories come back. You can have the bad memories of all the things that you're hurt or upset about or you feel are unprocessed, but you also can have the good memories come back. And when that happens, it really creates confusion because you end up for one having a surge of all this thought about this good person that you had experience with and missing them, but it also can put you at risk of wanting to reacquaint yourself with them, to reach out and have contact with them. It makes you want to do the connection, then you're at risk at like checking in with them, yes, they like to check in with us, but it increases our likelihood of actually checking in with them. And that's bad because then we're right back into the throes of the relationship. And anyone knows who's in this whole arena of narcissistic abuse knows that unfortunately narcissists see that as you giving kind of like you whitewash all the bad things that ever happened. It's as if you're now approving of the abuse and that you're picking back up, and now they think you know everything, and so they're worse than ever because it's like you just gave them a get out of jail pass free card, which is really, really awful. I usually don't react to trolls, but I want to when they come in and say, well, who hurt you, or any of that kind of rejecting information. I just find it super, super painful because we're reacting to something that we didn't do to ourselves. We're reacting to something that happened. We got pulled into a relationship we didn't know was toxic. We thought we met this fabulous person because that's how they presented. In fact, have you seen my discussion of narcissistic abuse versus abuse? And I know that's an upcoming podcast topic, but I also did a video on it. And the difference is that narcissistic abuse is a subtype of abuse in that narcissistic abuse includes a deception, a creation of a false persona. Abuse in itself does not. In fact, people said, well, what would be an example of a non-false persona being abusive? Well, it's simple. Think of every time one of your parents who had a bad temper came home from work. They didn't mislead you that they had a bad day, and they didn't mislead you around the fact that they're their mother and had a relationship with you, or a father and had a relationship with you. They didn't even mislead you the fact that they were ouchy. You knew that from the moment that person stepped in the door that this may be a day you're going to need to stay out of their way, and you're waiting for it, hoping nothing bad happened until someone spills the milk at the table, or turns over their drink, or complains about how cold or hot or that the food doesn't taste good, and bam! There it goes. The explosion happens, and then that person just loses it on everybody, or at least on you. And then after the whole explosion's over, then everybody goes deathly quiet. Nobody says anything, and then you wait for this person to repair, and then they come back, and then they oh, I'm so sorry, and you know how I am after work, and can I get you a bowl of ice cream, and can I read you a book, or how about we watch that favorite show together? And then they're trying to make up for it, and that's the cycle to abuse. See, there's no deception there. There's no deception. Everybody knows this person's a hothead. Everybody knows things goes wrong. You just tiptoe around the person. You just tiptoe around them. Now, narcissistic abuse is completely different. Completely different. You met somebody that actually never existed. You met them because they knew they were creating a persona that's based on you. They are mimicking, mirroring, and parroting you. And they did it because they wanted to get something out of the relationship with you that they knew that if they said to you, hey, I don't have a place to live and I'd like to have sex with you. Can I move in with you? You'd say, hell no. There's the door. So they fake you out. They create a false persona, set you into this relationship, and then because it was never really who they were and it's hard to sustain this falsehood, then it starts to slip and you start to see who they really are. And that whole thing, that deception, while they're living their real life, they hope that you don't stumble on, while they see who they want to see and work or don't work or use your money without your permission or whatever they're doing, while they hope you don't catch on for as long as possible. And when those two worlds collide, then you realize that you have been horribly, horribly betrayed. And you start to wonder, who are you in a relationship with? And that's the first stage of cognitive dissonance. First stage. Somebody said, why do they sound all alike? It's because the setup's the same. So when you think about it for a second, back to source, when you think about it, the setup is to create this false persona in order to lure you into the relationship. And there's only so many ways to do it, right? I mean, you think about that. If you were to fake somebody out, even if a girlfriend, let's just, it doesn't even have to be a romantic relationship. Say even at work, somebody comes in at work and maybe they say they know the job and they don't really know the job. There's a way in which you sort of present yourself deceptively in order to exploit the situation. That's why these feel so scripted, is because there's not that many variations. You think about, just take for example, because I'm a writer and I always think about plots. Let's think about the hero story. Do you realize the hero story is the same? Down on the world, awful worldview. He has a secret, or she has a secret skill or talent, feels like nobody sees. Then suddenly something happens in the ordinary world that breaks it, and they have a big crisis, and things are never the same, and they begin to go on this journey of self-discovery and coming into themselves, and while they try to save the world. It's the same, there's a plot. The same for narcissistic abuse. It's like a plot. There's these points that happen, and the points are the same. It's just the variation. Your story is a little different from my story, is a little different from someone else's stories. But the plot in itself, and the way in which the plot unfolds, the way the manipulations and deceptions are, they're the same, and that's why it looks the same from person to person to person. That's why we can do these skits and I swear, where were you in the living room when that happened? Because you just quoted me verbatim on what happened in my life. That the most traumatic part was being a genuine person and ended up living a lie without any consent given. I agree. Well put. I think you nailed it. You nailed it. That was, I think for me, the other piece of all of this was so painful was that not only was I a genuine person, but I was vulnerably showing up. I mean, it was like I was risking my heart, my money, my life, exposure to my family. I mean, I was authentically bringing myself to this relationship, and then to discover this person brought nothing except the intent to exploit. Wow. I had a dream right after I found out he had been cheating, which I found out the most brutal way. I mean, it was really, really horrible. Oh, thank you guys. You guys are subscribing on. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. But here's the dream that I had right after I found out he'd been cheating. And by the way, I found out he met my family, just to give you the horrificness of it, this is the cheapness of it. He met my family, set up a special weekend for us to be at a hotel, and he did it so that he could go out and see somebody. He did it so he could cheat. So he met my family that night, walked me to the car, and then sent me home alone the day before our wedding, let me show up at the wedding to the venue alone with all the stuff, let me show up alone because he spent the night with somebody else. And I found out that 2 months later, on the last night of my honeymoon, that he'd spent the night with somebody else. I didn't know that. Can I explain DARVO? Yeah, absolutely. So DARVO stands for deny or deflect. I like the deflect too, because they don't just deny, they also deflect. You attack. So here's what happens. You make an innocent statement. Could be about anything. Maybe even is it conflictual, but it doesn't have to be conflictual. But you make a statement, and the person who hears it doesn't respond to the conflictual statement. In fact, they deny it. They'll deny it, and then they'll say you're attacking them for bringing that issue up, even though it was just an innocent statement. Let me give you, for instance, let's say I asked my son, what are we having for dinner? For him to do a DARVO, he would say, why do you always bring that up? And see, right there, he denied and attacked me at the same time. Why do you always bring that up? He's deflecting. He's not talking about the subject, and he's going after me. And then the next thing they would do is they reverse the role. Instead of them being the offender, which they're being offensive, they say, you're the offender for bringing the issue up. So they reverse the role of victim and offender. That's what the RVO stands for, reverse victor and offender. So he would say, let's use that same example. Why are you bringing that up? I hate how you put that on me, and it's such a heavy burden. It's just, I resent that. See, so now he's the one who's being hurt because I asked just what we're going to do for dinner. That's DARVO. Now, what do you do when you hit a DARVO situation? And that's a pretty innocent one, because they can get really, really nasty. I mean, they can get just crazy. The best way to do it is just to stay on task, which is to come back. So if in that scenario, it would be to say, I just would like to know what you'd like to do for dinner. And then if they continue to persist on, yes, and you always put me in these binds and I hate it and I resent this, you're just famous for this, you can just keep saying, yeah, but I'd like to know what you do for dinner. Or you can just shut down, turn around and walk away. There's another possible way to handle this, is just to cease to engage. But because most of them won't stop the attack. So you're not going to have that happen, but it doesn't mean you need to let it be effective. That's the part where we get into trouble. We get into trouble when we try to make them see reason. They're not going to see reason. And we also get in trouble when we take what they're saying personally and get defensive about it. So have you heard of JADE? JADE. JADE stands for don't justify, don't accuse, don't defend, and don't explain. Which is really hard because in those moments we feel so unappreciated and misunderstood, and it's out of alignment with our intent. We feel so horrified by what's happening that we want to do that. We want to justify, we want to accuse or defend or explain. So don't justify, accuse, defend, or explain. That's JADE. Oh, thank you guys so much for the subscriptions, both on YouTube and TikTok. And when you subscribe, here's what you get. And thank you so much, Louise. I have a private community called Toxic Free Relationship Club. You're immediately invited to join that. It's on Facebook, but also hosted on Discord. So you have ability to have like group voice chats on Discord, talk to me, talk to each other. And then once a month, we have video chats where we come and hang out together. And we just come on a video, like a Zoom call, and we come and just kind of bring ourselves and talk. It's not really, there's no big kind of education point. It's just us being real, developing relationships, having a safe place to talk about what's going on in your life, to know that you're not alone, to know that other people are with you. And then if you want to ask questions or hear about me, I'm a little more vulnerable there. And I'm also happy to educate as well, to kind of bring up information and stuff. But the other really big benefit of subscribing is for $5 a month, which is what it is, you get 25% off all of my resources. You get 25% off my course. That's a huge savings. It's a huge savings. So you get that code and it works with everything in my products. All right, you guys, y'all are amazing. Thank you to my mods. I appreciate it. Thank you to you for subscribing. I appreciate that. And I will see you back here, YouTube, on Tuesday. And I'll see you all on Thursday for the guided experience. Bye-bye.